Hello, and welcome to the after party, I guess we'll call it. So we are now post the 2023.2 KFP exam and AKT, so congratulations to everyone that got through. Surviving the exam is half the battle, but of course now we go into the wait. So quite a wait until we do get the results through. I can see a couple of people jumping in chat already. Good to have you in here. And Demir, I hope you're doing well and hope you do well when you sit in 2024.1. What an exam. I think it's safe to say that it was probably about what a lot of us were expecting. There are a few questions in there that everyone, I think, came out thinking, what on earth was that? And one of the first things I want to come out and say is that that is normal. I think that there's a lot of people that will come out feeling like they've failed, they are going to be completely fine. And this is one of those exams that really you just have to wait and see when you do come through as to how it's actually going to go. We'll wait and see. So let us bring up, if this is going to work, there we go. Whoop. Failed the transition. We are now 71 days until we get the KFP exam results released. It's a little bit earlier for the AKT exams. However, we now have this rather massive countdown. And I want to come out and say that as painful as it is, as frustrating as it is, I actually think it's a really, really good thing that we do have this long delay here. And to fill you in on what's happening behind the scenes with the college as to why there is such a long wait till we get the results through. So I think first thing first is the results go through to the exam assessors. Well, first of all, they will have to be scanned and digitized to be distributed. That in and of itself, for the hundreds of people sitting, is no small endeavour, but they then get broken up into their relevant sections and sent out to the people marking each of those. Pardon me. Yeah, I've still got that cough. It's still lingering. I cannot shake it. Oh well. Now, of course, they get those and they have their kind of established marking rubrics of what they're expecting the marks to be, and they go through and start to mark the exams. Now, one of the benefits of having the same people marking the same questions is that, yes, it does take a very long time for them to get through every single person that sat the exam, but it means there's good standardization between the marking. You're not going to be having one person potentially skewing the results, but it also means they're going to be the ones that will pick up on whether or not lots of people are putting down the same response, even if it's not in the rubric. And that gives them then the opportunity to go back and say, well, should this have been a valid answer? Yes or no? And should we actually go back and modify the marking rubric to make that a valid answer? Or should this question actually be scrapped or rewritten outright, or have it just excluded from the overall marking summary? Now, of course, that then has to go to other people, other committees, and the whole thing can drag out for quite a while. But I want you to have some kind of understanding and some explanation as to why there is this massive delay between sitting the exam and the months, really, but between getting our results. So just because we haven't heard anything yet doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom. Things are happening the way they need to. It's just going to be time. So moving on then, now is the time for self-care. For those of us who have sat the exam, it's a chance to catch up on sleep if you did miss out, to make sure you're looking after yourself again, eat well, take regular breaks, practice mindfulness, exercise, avoid cramming, because I know a lot of people are preparing study for CCE, and a lot of people actually still study for AKT and KFP after the exams if they feel they didn't get the marks they wanted to get. And that's perfectly fine if you want to, but know that there is a decent chunk of time between now and the next exam, and often we do go hard up until the end, so make sure you are actually taking time to pace yourself, give yourself that little bit of a break, and big congratulations and a pat on the back for getting through the exams, regardless of their outcomes. Just surviving them is a massive, massive accomplishment, and that alone deserves its own appreciation. But wait, that's right, it hasn't ended just yet, because we are now 122 days to the 2023.2 CCE exam. Now, for those who haven't had a chance to really go through yet, the CCE exam is made up of 9 clinical cases, 4 case discussions, and 5 clinical encounters. Each one's 15 minutes with a 5-minute or so reading time beforehand as well. Now, the college actually holds these over 2 sessions of up to 3 hours, spread out over 2 different weekends, and you're allocated one of those weekends, which means that not everyone gets the same questions. It's based on which time you're allocated to. Obviously, they can't reuse the same questions for it, but this does obviously raise some concerns around, well, person X sat a different exam to me. Is it fair if they pass and I haven't? Don't know. With just the number of applicants, I think it's a logistics thing, and I think they have to do what they have to do with the resources they have to make it work. Now, if you haven't seen, there is a preparation course available on GP Learning, so log into the RACGP website, check it out on GP Learning. I know if I tried to search for it, I really struggled to actually find the course directly, and so I've got the link there, and I'll have this in the notes below as well. And I would strongly encourage everyone that is planning on sitting CCE exam later on this year to go through and run through that information. So the case discussions are where you talk to an examiner one-on-one using a theoretical case as the foundation of the assessment. You get that 5-minute reading time. In that time, you can make notes and start to plan out what it is you want to be doing, following which there is 15 minutes of discussion with the examiner directly. So this is judging clinical reasoning and decision-making, your organisational and practice processes, any medical, legal or ethical issues that may be raised, as well as population health and the kind of catch-all term cultural competency, which is, I think, actually a good way of saying it's taking the patient's background into consideration as you're treating them. Now, it's the examiner's responsibility in the case discussions to keep you on time. So they might actually interrupt from time to time or nudge you on to say, in the interest of time, I'm going to move to the next question. Questions are asked verbally. And the types of questions you'll get may be, what is this problem definition? What is your key or differential diagnosis? What is the probability diagnosis? In a very similar vein to the KFP exam, in fact. They may ask for what investigations and or their reasoning for responses are. So where the AKT, Applied Knowledge Exam, is about your specific medical knowledge, and the KFP exam is about teasing out your reasoning and thought processes. This is then demonstrating all of those together in your communication skills as well, which I think this is probably, if one had to say, this is probably going to be my favourite of the 3 exams in terms of actually showing that you can be a good GP. Where I think a lot of people may struggle with either the AKT or KFP. I think if you are turning up, seeing patients day to day, I don't think you'll have a major trouble with the CCE exam. Perhaps the time crunch, if you're someone like me, where sometimes shortening things down and sticking to a time limit can be a little bit more difficult. You might need to just practice that technique. But thankfully, the college has actually come out and given us some of the marking rubrics so that we have a bit of an idea of what we're in for. So this is one of the example competency marking grids that they've released. This is part of it. We'll go through a few more shortly. And you can see it's actually relatively broad in terms of its marking criteria, which I think is good because it leaves then the judgment and interpretation of your approach to the examiner to be able to decide their thoughts. Now, they do list kind of, let's go to communication and consultation skills as one. Point 7 uses appropriate strategies to motivate and assist patients in maintaining health behaviours. They do have specific little focuses like that in the marking rubric, which is very, very handy. We'll go through why in a moment. And it ranges through communication and consultation skills, information gathering and interpretation, diagnosis, decision-making and reasoning, clinical management and therapeutic reasoning. You'll see the number of kind of domains in each, number of kind of subheadings in each domain can vary, as well as preventative and population health. You can see here there's actually a fair few things in this block. And at the end is an examiner's overall rating of the candidate. What isn't clear from the materials they've released so far is to how heavily this weighs into the end mark. But I feel like for those that may get that kind of borderline mark in terms of ticking the boxes above, if you meet borderline or at expected standard here, that would probably carry you over. And I think this then also comes through, well, how well do you present to the patient? What are your communication skills? How are you able to convey knowledge across? The clinical encounters are a little bit different though. They're an interaction between a candidate and a patient, although it can be a relative or colleague, and that can be things like a clinical handover or a clinical debrief of a situation, which is then observed and assessed by an examiner after that interaction. So you're given instructions on the tasks that must be achieved in that 15-minute station, and from what I can gather, that's provided in that 5 minutes kind of reading preparation time at the start. Now, the key difference between the clinical encounters then is that you are then responsible for staying on time. You will not be prompted to move to the next question if you are running over. And so this is where I think practicing with someone who has a timer or is able to run through clinical cases with you would be invaluable. So hit up your supervisors now to set up for a few sessions to practice this, and we'll try and get some sessions run ourselves. So in terms of what kind of encounters might you have, it could be anything from a challenging communication scenario, an undifferentiated clinical situation, which bring it on, that's our bread and butter. Acute care and prioritisation of care needs, that kind of more triage setting, as well as, of course, the medical, legal and ethical issues, professionalism, and again, multi-morbidity, our absolute bread and butter in general practice. Running through the course, some of the tips they provide is to make sure you're actually reading the material. Similar to the KFP, it's one of those, most information is provided there. There will be more than one page, so making sure that you're actually reading all of the material that is provided there. You can take notes on plain paper, and it can be done in the reading time as well as during the case as well. Try and build a plan of attack going in, so that bearing in mind those checkboxes the assessor's trying to get through, you can perhaps sometimes tease out what kind of boxes are going to be there based on the questions or information that's been provided. Of course, in terms of your communication skills, you should be treating it as if the patient's actually in front of you in the clinic, and that is by far the best approach I hear again and again, is just do what you would do in day-to-day life, day-to-day clinical practice, and you should be fine. Now, if you are interacting with the examiner or sim patient, make sure that you are listening carefully to all the things they're saying, because there will often be little cues and prompts thrown in to either bring you back on track if you are deviating slightly, or to hint as to what might be coming up next. And of course, just as we do in general practice, prepare to adapt to new information as it's provided, and just like how the KFP exam will give you perhaps one or two questions on a similar theme and then kind of deviate on a third or fourth question, the same thing may happen in the CCE as well. So there are some additional RACGP resources I thought I'd highlight, and the first is actually going through, they have released actually the domains and subheadings for all of the clinical competencies which align with the provided clinical competency assessment sheets, and so that would be a very, very handy thing if you want to know what kind of things could be assessed and what kind of domains you should be focusing on. And of course, the CCE exam support resources, which are on the RACGP website as well. So how are we going to prepare for this? Well, I'm hoping to actually run similar to how I've been running KFP sessions, which I'm keen to actually continue for future. I want to run some practice CCE sessions, and there's a link in the description below, so click on there to sign up, put your email down, name down, and we'll tee up some sessions for 12 weeks before the CCE exam to likewise once a week catch up, run through a couple of cases, and have it, if you're happy, recorded and live streamed as well for building that base of resources for those that come after us. So that was the presentation side of things I wanted to get through tonight. I did want to talk a little bit about the KFP exam itself for those that are watching and are planning on sitting in the future. And it seems the link may not have come onto there. I will have to make sure it is added on after if it isn't there already. Oh, no, there it is. In the description, there should be a thing of course, you must also prepare for the CTE, sign up for our upcoming Zoom practice sessions beginning 12 weeks before the exam. And there's a link on generally practicing for sign up for CCE practice sessions. We'll bring that up to there, sorry. So I will copy that actually and pop that straight into the chat so you can see it there. and copy, paste, and there it is. Oh, that shows up on screen just perfectly. I should use a URL shortener, sorry. But yeah, feel free to sign up on there, and we'll set up some of those sessions in the future. Now, of course, we are not able to talk about specific questions that came up in the KFP exam, but I wanted to just kind of pick your brains in the chat as well, and mention just some of the general themes that kind of came up that I thought were noteworthy and worth passing on for future generations. I think the first thing I wanted to mention was I think that there were a lot of common presentations for general practice, perhaps one or two that were done in a slightly different way that could throw you off, that made you sit down and think, okay, what is the actual question being asked, and making sure again that you really are reading the question being asked, because there are a few times that I caught myself out answering something only to realize at the last minute, oh, actually, wait, that one extra word they snuck in there completely changes the kinds of answers they were wanting. So really, really making sure you are reading each question very carefully. Time management, I think, was actually pretty reasonable for the exam, and speaking to everyone else that sat at the same venue I did, that was a similar kind of reflection. We weren't swimming in time. We had one person leave a little bit early, but everyone else stayed for the full 4 hours. And we're all doing things, I think, right up to that 4-hour mark, although we're all kind of in revision mode by that point. And that there were a couple of these practice sessions that I'd done that I was very happy I had done, because certain things were very, very familiar. Now, I think there's always going to be those common themes of there's always going to be a case of abnormal uterine bleeding. There's always going to be a case talking about Indigenous health and inequity in healthcare delivery. There's always going to be a kind of more practice-oriented question about someone's made a mistake, how do you handle it, or what is the processes to achieve X or Y. And so I think making sure that you are preparing for some of those more likely kind of case situations is good. I know there was one question in particular that threw off a lot of the people sitting at the same venue I did, around a very complicated patient, and how sometimes doing less is more, doing the bread and butter little things rather than not getting yourself caught up and flustered by a lot of very fine, intricate details can sometimes be worth taking that extra breath to do. Whenever I'm teaching medical students coming into medicine, I always say, when you walk into a situation that you feel is outside of your immediate control, the first pulse you check is your own. And there were a couple of times where I was checking my own pulse in that exam. So feel free to throw into the chat your thoughts. Again, we can't talk about specific questions or specific content, but if anyone did sit over the weekend, throw some things into the chat to let me know how you felt it went as well. I think also one thing that probably is worth mentioning as well, and I'm really struggling not to give too much detail in here, do the practice exams they give out. I think that there are always going to be common themes between the types of questions they give you in a practice exam versus what's going to be in the actual exam. Again, they're not trying to trick you, and if you go through the KFP exam reports that are released after the exam, you should notice that they release information about how much more likely you are to pass the KFP exam if you have done the practice exams released. And there is always a correlation between those who have done those practice exams versus those who pass. Now, that's obviously going to be skewed, because I think those that are doing those practice exams or reporting they've done those practice exams are going to be showing that little bit more investment and time spent on the study, and I appreciate that's not always going to be possible for a lot of people, but little things like that can make a massive, massive difference. Pardon me for still having some sniffles here. Now, yeah, so a comment up here from Samia. I found some really vague scenarios. at least around 3, and being asked the single most likely diagnosis. Yep. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. But this is where, though, we come to the falling back to those principles of, well, what are we thinking is the most likely thing here? And I know one of the stations, again, I can't give out details, I did give a rather generic kind of answer because I wasn't able to specify. In particular for some of the stations where they actually give you lots of information and tell you that all these abnormalities have been excluded, definitively excluded. And then they say, well, what's the diagnosis? Like, but all the good ones are taken. Sometimes giving a vague, wishy-washy answer is all that they want. So keep that in mind. Now, the practice exams, they get emailed out to you. So a question here from Demir. How do you access the practice exams? They get emailed out by RACGP before the actual exam. So you should have them directly emailed to you. Now, of course, there are notices placed on the exams that they are not to be redistributed, but you will not uncommonly find a stockpile of them in practices where other registrars have also sat. Not that I can condone that by any stretch, but it is something that you may find possible at your practice. Comment here as well. I did think the RACGP practice exams were very simplified. Yes, so they're one of the things that I've heard several times from educators and exam assessors is that the questions that are in the practice exams are usually questions that have been in previous exams that have been there for too long or have been used too many times, and so they've then been kind of recycled out of that pool. And it probably is the more simple questions that are given that kind of treatment, because I imagine some of the more complex or harder to generate questions probably get rejigged, reworked, and placed back into the pool again. But yeah, and I think that's a fair criticism that they are a bit more simplified than the ones you'll find in the actual exam. Yep, you've mentioned there. Yep, so they will be emailed just before the exams. Jinx. Again, it's really frustrating that we can't just openly discuss what some of the content was, simply because I think there were some really good points about specific questions that reinforce that they're not trying to trick you. You just have to make sure you're reading all the information provided carefully. And there's, for example, one mark that I know I've missed. I've lost. Goodbye, Mark. I will never see you again, but I'll miss you. Was a response to a situation where a certain treatment which I had prescribed would not have been an accepted answer due to a comorbidity, and it was just one word in the stem that I had read and either by brain or hadn't read, that afterwards I kind of realised, oh wait, hold on, that means no. And of course I'm hoping I'm making up marks elsewhere, but yeah. And I think as well, after you come out of these exams, it's easy to then remember all those marks that you know you won't get, bearing in mind that there's 26 cases, each with 2 to 4 questions on them. Odds are if you're remembering a handful of questions that you won't get right, you're probably going to be fine. All those other ones that you've done, you're going to get through. So, to kind of wrap things up tonight, it will be a pretty short one, I think, if there's no more questions coming in from the chat. For those that sat the KFP exam, congratulations. Again, just surviving that 4 hours is worth a pat on the back. Do take a bit of time to recharge, renew yourself, prepare yourself for the CC exam, and we'll wait until the exam results are released. One point I should make on the CC exam is that, yes, we have to pay to sit the CC exam and send that money through before we know the KFP results. And if you aren't successful in the KFP and AKT, then they refund you the CCE submission money, and then you can reset it down the line once you have passed KFP and AKT. It's a frustrating, weird quirk. I can appreciate they do it to get an idea of how many stations to prepare or how much staff they need, but quite frustrating to have to fork out what's a rather large sum of money on the hope that you have got through. Is what it is. It's just getting the timing, I guess. And comments just popped up. Sorry. Do I wait till the AKT results before starting my CCE preparation? So I would say in some regards we are saved already, because the CCE is what we do day to day. And if you're practicing kind of good medicine, if you're thinking each case through that kind of what other preventative activities could I be doing? What is the red flags I'm trying to catch here? I think you're going to be fine. But because there are particulars to the exam formatting, it probably is worth starting not straight away. Give yourself a month, possibly even a month and a half, 2 months to just recharge yourself, because the AKT and KFP can be absolutely brutal. But I think it is worthwhile having some preparation before sitting CCE. And again, I'll be setting up some live streams and sessions through Zoom through this as well. There, again, isn't much in terms of fantastic resources out there. There are some published books on clinical cases, and if you can get your hands on some of those as well, fantastic. Probably something that would be just as handy is sitting down with your supervisors and doing just random case analysis. So open up random day, random doctor, random patient, and talk through with your supervisor. Okay, what was this presentation? What happened? What history questions would you ask? What would be the red flags? What likely diagnosis, differentials, management plan, and stepping through it as if it were a CCE station. Because I'm a massive nerd and they have given us the CCE marking rubric, or at least the domains from that, I am in the works of building a tool to kind of generate random marking rubrics based on just randomly pulling sections from that rubric. And once that's finished, I'll pop it up online on Generally Practicing for people to play with. And I'll have a video kind of detailing how to use it as well. Cool. I'll see if there's any last minute questions popping through. Again, for those who are sitting the AKT and KFP later, let's say start of next year, I'm still hoping to run a few more of these KFP sessions and release more questions, so keep an eye on the channel. There'll be stuff coming through in the next couple of months as well. But obviously for myself, there's going to be a little bit more of a switch over to CCE, as well as a couple of other little videos I'm keen to make just on efficiency in general practice. One of the things I have set up at my work, for example, is a stream deck, and going through results takes me 2 seconds with that. So I'll be making videos on that just while I'm keeping myself entertained. See a question up here, actually. I see people sharing books like Susan Wern and GPRA books. How good are they? So I've actually got the GPRA books here. They're good to give you things to think about. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any surprises. They tend to cover a lot of the similar kind of topics. But if you're wanting that kind of structured approach to what kind of things could I be seeing and what kind of questions could I be asking, they can be quite helpful for that. The benefit to them is that there's often kind of a recycled supply coming through after each CCE as people want to offload all the books they've got. So probably the easiest place there is to check out Facebook Marketplace or what's it called? GPs for Fellowship Prep Australia, I think the Facebook group is. They almost always have copies up there for sale, as well as GPs Down Under. If you post up there you're looking for these books, often you'll get a heap of people saying, oh, yep, I've got a copy of that. DM me and I'll send you through some details. Again, sadly, apart from doing that or forking out for a lot of online courses, there's not too many other resources there, which is why I wanted to highlight some of the, in fact, we'll pop it up back to here. Well, some of the RACGP resources. The Clinical Competency Exam Support resource is definitely worth having a look through. And the preparation course available on GP Learning. Again, I really struggled to actually find the course by searching in GP Learning. I had to follow a couple of links to find an old link to it, which got me this one. So I thought I'd post this one up here. Definitely worth stepping through and having a look at to see and just make sure the details are there. One of the reasons why I say that, I'm trying to clarify this as well, is that I know in the past when people have sat the CCE, there's been 2 stations actually going through a scientific journal article. So they would provide you before the exam, I think it was a couple of weeks before the exam or a week before the exam, you would be allocated a journal article and you had to read it. And in the exam, you would then be asked a series of questions about that article and you would have to have appropriate responses. Now, I don't think that's being run anymore. But again, I'm trying to get clarification if that is or isn't the case, because it was something that was done until a couple of years back, but it seems to have been something they've paused for now, which is, I think, frustrating because I think it is a good thing to be assessed on. And as well, I always think it's nice to have a station you can feel like you've specifically prepared for. But again, I'll let people know as soon as I find out an answer. All right. Well, with no other questions in the chat, congratulations. Good luck for those who are continuing their study. And of course, I'll be putting up more videos, more live streams in the future. Thanks for joining me in here tonight. It's been fantastic studying with you all. And thank you for joining me on this journey. And I hope in some way, shape or form, I've been able to help you on your own little journey and get through this exam, which is a beast. So have a great night, great week, and I'll see you sometime in the future.